Before you get listening to this episode, please know that suicide is talked about extensively. If you are having suicidal thoughts, please reach out to the National Suicide Hotline. In the US, that's 988. The Trevor Project also has a helpful number for those in the LGBTQ community who may be experiencing a crisis. That number is 1-866-488-7386. Welcome to the exfostervoice, where we represent the voices of those who have lived through the foster system. I'm Serena Vasudeva, ex-foster youth, and your host. Today we'll be hearing from Sammie Stewart, who went into foster care when she was 2. She lived with family members and foster parents until she was adopted at 14. Now she's a junior at Middle Tennessee State University majoring in social work. When she graduates, she wants to work for the Department of Children's Services to help out those who were once in her shoes. So Sammie, let's start with why you went into foster care to begin with.
Okay, I went to foster care when I was 2 with my 2 biological sisters. Our father went to jail, and that left us with our mother. And I guess she just decided she didn't want kids anymore, and so she signed away her rights, and we went to foster care.
So you had a court-appointed special advocate, or CASA worker. When did you meet her?
I think I met my CASA worker when I was like 4 or 5.
According to Rutherford County's CASA page, CASA volunteers advocate for abused or neglected children in order to make sure they don't get lost in the overburdened legal and social service system. Volunteers typically handle one case at a time, stay with each case until it is closed or until the child is placed in a permanent home. For many of the children we serve, their CASA volunteer will be the one constant adult presence in their lives. To you, what is a CASA worker?
I think a CASA worker is an advocate for like the kid that they're representing. They go to the home and they do home studies. They're really there to just be with the kids when their parents are battling in court and to, make them feel safe.
So when you were 12, you moved in with your friend's family, the Spates. You were there for about a month before your CASA worker came to visit you during a pool party. Can you tell me what happened?
The pool party. I remember that pool party as we just had friends coming over. Later I realized that it was actually families coming to see me and my sisters to see if they would want us. It was 2 families, the Stewarts, which is my CASA worker Shannon. She's the one that ended up adopting me. And then the family that my sister, who we'll call Megan, who adopted her. I remember the pool party as like my adopted little sisters. They like went swimming and we all had food and we had fun and they got tired. And so me and my best friend Anna went upstairs to the room that we were sharing. It was her room, but I was sleeping with her. And I turned on Scooby-Doo for the kids, and one of their twins actually sat in my lap. I think the Stewarts will even tell people that like that's kind of when they knew that I was like the kid that they would want. It's because their shy daughter sat in a complete stranger's lap for like the first time meeting. So that was the pool party.
Is there anything else about this memory that you've noticed now that you're an adult?
I definitely think back then I thought it was completely innocent, those people coming over, but now that, I'm almost 22 and I look back on the things that happened and the events that followed, this is kind of bad, but I kind of see it as like them coming to pick out a puppy, and I was good with their kids, so I was the puppy they picked. So that definitely stands out to me, that's how they chose me, because I was good with their kids. I think back then I was really like, wow, like we're going to have a party, like we're going to have people over, everybody's going to be swimming, we're just going to have fun. And now that I'm older, I'm like, that's not at all what was happening. Like that's what they wanted it to seem like, but really it was them coming to pick a kid. I feel like that's just a really weird way of coming to see if you want to adopt a kid, because I feel like it shouldn't be that way. You should just take a kid that needs help.
With your experience, what do you think the correct way is to meet with like a teenager that you're thinking of adopting?
I will preface this with I've obviously never tried to adopt a kid before, so I don't really know the full process. I've been on the adoptee side, like I was the one adopted. I think it really just depends on the kid's situation, what's really going on. Because, a lot of families will just open their doors and have a kid dropped off, and that's kind of the first time they've met them. So I don't know if that's better, but I do feel like the way they did it was maybe even degrading, like in a way now that I'm like, I think about it and I'm like, wow, like I wish they hadn't done it that way. I wish they would have just told me instead of kind of like lying. Not even lying, because I know the Spates wouldn't do that, but just kind of like keeping it from me. Definitely not the way they did it, but I'm not sure what a better way would be, because I feel like maybe you should definitely meet the kid and make sure the kid is okay, and in a way that makes the kid feel like they're included and they're going to be loved and that they're safe.
So about a month after this pool party, you had a therapy session with Megan and Sadie, your biological siblings. What happened at this therapy session?
This therapy session was for all three of us. I remember going in, being nervous. I remember my guardian ad litem, Angela, being there. And that was weird because, therapy is like you just go in. You don't go in with, like, all the people. I remember my oldest sister, Sadie, going in and, waiting for her. And she came out crying. I mean, I had seen her cry before, but never really like that. And I, tried to see if she was okay before we went in, and she, just didn't want to talk. I remember me and my middle sister, Megan, we went in, and our guardian ad litem, Angela, she went in with us. And I sat in her lap, and Megan sat beside us. I first went in, I was like, what did you do? What did you do to Sadie? Why is she so upset out there? Like, what did you do to her? And they were like, she wants to tell you what happened, and that's her business, but as her counselor, it's not my business to tell you. I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, at this point, I'm, nervous, right? Because I'm what is going on? You guys are scaring me, and they go, we found homes for you guys. And, they started off with my middle sister and telling her that one of the families that were at the pool party to come and see us, decided that they wanted to take her and to adopt her, and she even said, it's my biggest dream, I can't wait, it's awesome, and kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, because I obviously wanted to stay together. So she moved in with them actually a few weeks later, even though she actually didn't end up getting adopted by them. She actually went back into foster care because she just didn't want to be adopted. And then so they told her she was going with that family, and then they were like, Sammie, you're going with the Stewarts. The Stewarts want you. And I was like, I don't really want to be separated, but I guess this is my choice. This or foster care, And I eventually learned that my sister was crying because, she was almost 17, and nobody really wants to adopt a 17-year-old. And so they were telling her that. Eventually, my best friend, the family we were living with, had decided that they wanted her. She ended up deciding as well that she didn't want to be adopted, so she took their last name and went back into foster care. So I was the only one that was adopted in that situation. It's probably one of the hardest therapy sessions I've ever been in, which is saying a lot. Because I've, been in therapy for a long time. I think before that, I had an inkling that they were going to separate us, but I still had, that hope that, somebody would want all three of us, because in, my almost 13 years at that point, they had been the only two people that were completely constant. And, of course, I was just about to be a teenager and, getting ready for puberty, and I needed my sisters there. And so, they told me then, I think it was definitely good on their part that they did it in that environment. Because for me, at least, my therapist's office is a very safe environment for me, and my guardian ad litem, Angela, she'd always been, and always has been, a very safe person for me. So it was a good thing on their part to do it there. It was still really hard, though.
And it's very common for, 3 teenagers to all get separated and go to different homes.
Yeah. It's really hard for people to want to take 3, especially when it's almost 18. My oldest sister was getting up there, and I don't know, my 2 older sisters, they went through a lot more than I did because they chose not to be adopted, and I did. So I was in a somewhat stable home until I was 18, so.
What is it like to get an adoption offer as a preteen?
Oh gosh. Scary, and also just kind of felt like it was my only option at that point. Especially after hearing that my oldest sister, nobody really wanted her. I think that was definitely eye-opening, and like damn, like I'm almost teenager, like nobody's gonna want me, like this family wants me, I need to say yes. Like I don't have another choice. Nobody else is gonna want a teenager. It's this or nothing, buddy. It's really scary. Moving in with a family you've never met before, especially without the 2 people you've been with your entire life.
So now my next question. Did you feel pressured to accept that offer?
I will say I don't felt pressure from anyone around me. Like, it wasn't like a, Sammie, I gotta do this. Like, nobody told me that I needed to, but you kind of do feel like, I gotta do this. Like, there's, like, it's this or, like, skipping around in foster homes for the rest of my life, or the rest of my, high school career and middle school. And so I think I did definitely feel like this unspoken pressure that this was my last chance to get, like, a good family, what seemed like a good family.
That first day of moving in, what did it sort of feel like?
Really scary. I had been to their house before because the day I found out I was going to be adopted by them, they came and got me for dinner, and we went by their house so I could meet their dog to make sure, the dog would be okay. And obviously he was, because I'm good with dogs. But I do remember they came with the van to come pick me up from the Spade's house. It was really, really weird because all of a sudden I wasn't the youngest anymore. I was the oldest. They showed me where my own room was, and I had, like, Barbie dolls and stuff. And, of course, like, little girls, they're like 8 and 6 years younger than me. Of course, they wanted to play with, like, all my Barbie dolls and stuff. And so that was, like, a weird kind of, it was very weird, like, going to bed in a house that, I remember I didn't sleep that night because I was listening to the house settle, like, all night. And I was used to sleeping with someone else because I slept in the same bed as, like, Anna because we shared a room. So, it was just really weird and scary, honestly.
Yeah, sounds very surreal and alien.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Yeah, it's always weird. You lay down and it, like, smells different, and, like, the blanket might be a little softer than you're used to. Just weird stuff like that. Did you ever ask Shannon to see your sisters, and how did that go?
Yeah, I did. I remember asking a lot the first couple of years I lived with them. In the first year before I was adopted, my sisters came around, a decent amount. Like, they were at my birthday party and stuff like that. But after a little while, honestly, after I was adopted, I'm pretty sure it was when a lot of things started going downhill. I would ask, or my sisters would message, and eventually I stopped asking because Shannon would be, just visibly angry about it. Like, she didn't want me to see them, and she'd say stuff like, you can talk to them whenever you want. I'd be like, no, I can't, because you get mad at me every single time. Like, I don't want to ask because then you'll be mad at me for, like, 3 days. And I don't want to live with like that. Like, I'd rather just not talk to him. And honestly, I didn't even know how much my sisters tried to talk to me until afterwards when I reconnected, when I moved out. I reconnected with my oldest sister, and I don't remember how we got onto the topic, but she said something like, I would try and talk to you all the time. And I was like, no, you didn't. She's like, yeah, I did. I'd message Shannon, and she'd say, like, you guys were too busy, or not right now. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. She never told me. And she was like, yeah, I assumed so. So I just stopped and just hoped you'd reconnect with me after you, like, left. I was like, well, I didn't even know, 'cause she wouldn't even tell me. So I didn't talk to them a whole lot whenever I lived with them.
It sounds incredibly isolating, really.
It really was. I think Shannon did that on purpose because, I mean, they didn't raise me. They didn't know how I was raised. So I think it really made them nervous. People that I knew from my past, I think that they thought maybe my sisters would corrupt me or something, because honestly I was just kind of a good kid. You know, after I moved in with them, I just did what I was told most of the time.
You mentioned this. Did you live with them in a sort of pre-adoptive stage?
I did. So I moved in with them June 24th of 2014, and they adopted me in December of 2015. So it was like a year-ish.
What was your relationship like with Shannon once she adopted you?
Honestly, we had a weird relationship. Shannon would... This is such a hard question to answer because there's so many things that go into the relationship I had with her. Like, when I started high school, Shannon would give me a hug every day before school. It was kind of like a ritual type thing. She'd hug me every day before I went to school, tell me have a good day, whatever. But also, Shannon would kind of treat me like... Obviously, she treated me like a nanny and a cook. And so sometimes, you know, she'd go out and be with her friends, or when she was in the school board, she'd go to these, parties for people and, like, meetings and stuff. She'd come home and she'd be drunk, or maybe she wouldn't be drunk, she'd just tipsy. She'd come home and, tell me everybody's business like I was her best friend. That was definitely weird. It was like she was trying to be my mother, but also she would say things that would make it feel like she wasn't. I think within the first year I moved in with them, we were at Red Robin, and the girls were fighting in the bathroom. I'd taken them to the bathroom because, they needed to go potty. And Stella was hitting the other girls, and so I literally go into the bathroom and I put my arm in between them so that she wouldn't hit the girls. And of course Stella went and told them, and I remember Shannon grabbing my arm, pretty hard, and saying, like, don't put your hands on my girls. I was like, so I'm not your girl. Like, just like weird small comments like that just kind of added up over the years that I was like, this isn't what it was intended to be. You can tell when somebody's intentions aren't true.
When you were adopted, your adoptive siblings, the siblings you lived with, how many were there?
There were 3.
Once you were adopted, what sort of things did you do around the house?
A lot of things. I would, help cook. Sometimes I'd cook dinner by myself. I'd clean. A lot of times I didn't go out with people my age because I had to watch the girls. I remember one time I went to a football game in high school on a Friday, and then that next day they had somewhere they wanted to go, but I wasn't allowed to go because I went to the football game. So I had to stay home and scrub the kitchen.
How often did you babysit, and what ages were the kids you were babysitting?
I babysat the girls a lot, especially when I started driving. When I first moved in, I think the oldest was 7, or almost 7, which would have made the other girls 4, almost 5.
Did this ever detract from your teenage years?
Absolutely, yeah. I honestly rarely went out with friends. I think one thing I did get to do was youth group. That was like it's like, going to praise the Lord, going to, so that was like one of the things that I did get to do. But even then I'd get like guilt tripped when I went to do that. So yeah, I definitely do. I could have done so many more things. Like, I remember sophomore year, it was the first time I did cross country since 7th grade. And I really enjoyed that, but when I got my job, it was pretty much me going to work, me taking care of the girls. And that's pretty much all I had time for, and like school, of course. But even then, I didn't really have that much time for school because I had to do my school work downstairs. I wasn't allowed to do it in my room. So I'd get off and really late from work and then get home at like 11 and have barely any time to do my homework before I had to go to work. Or before I had to go to bed. So it definitely did take away from me being able to be a teenager and, like, make a couple mistakes and learn from them. And I think I definitely had to be way more mature than a lot of people our age.
Why weren't you allowed to do your homework in your room?
I don't really know. That was just a rule that John and Shannon had. We had this bar above the stove. It was like between the den and the kitchen, and so anywhere they were, they could like watch me. And it was just this thing where they didn't want me to do my homework upstairs, so like I had to do it at the bar. I wasn't allowed to do it anywhere else. I do remember sometimes I worked at Sammie Tomato Pizza in like South Jackson. I know you don't know where that is, but some people might. But it like closed down. But when I worked there, I would get off super late. It was like 30 minutes from my house. And so I'd get home. I'd be stinky from my working at a pizza place. And I'd sit there for a little while being exhausted. And they would sit there. Like one of them would be sitting in the den in the chairs until I went to bed. And so my people pleaser person was like, well, they're waiting up. They're going to be super exhausted. I better just go to bed, Part of me, sometimes I would sneak, like if I had like some paper homework that I needed to do, I would sneak it upstairs while they went to bed and do it in my room. But technically that wasn't allowed. I wasn't allowed to do that. I would have gotten in trouble if I got caught.
I think you're the only person I've ever met who's had to sneak to do their homework.
Honestly, I think a lot of people around us, like families around us, didn't realize how much control they had over me. I think they still kind of don't, which is weird. From the very moment I moved in with them, it was very clear that I was supposed to be the good kid and the example for the little girls. And so a lot of times, even when I was pissed off, even when I wanted to, throw shit and be rebellious and just fuck it, be done with it, I didn't, because I cared so much about how the girls saw things. And I think, honestly, there's a little piece of me that was like, I only have a few more years left. I've dealt with so much stuff before I moved here, it's just a few years. I'll just, I'll go to college and have some freedom, and I'll just live then. So yeah, I do remember getting in arguments with Shannon. One time she told me I could go to a basketball game. I had stayed after school. I'd left my phone in my car. I went to go talk to this girl I was having a conflict with, who Shannon had told me. I talked to Shannon about it. I was like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, just talk to the girl, resolve it, it'll be fine. And so I did that. I stayed after school. We talked for like an hour after school, just in her car, fixing stuff. And when I got home, Shannon was pissed. She was like, fuck, where are you? Like, what were you doing? Like, how could you be at school that late? Like, where were you really? And I was like, I was fixing this conflict. Like, I did exactly what you told me to. I'm sorry I didn't relay that to you. But I was in this girl's car with her, like, trying to fix stuff. And she was like, you can't go to the game. And I remember arguing with her, like, I literally did what you told me to do with this girl. What more do you want from me? Like, I remember crying, and actually later, she had, I guess she was on the phone with Jonathan, and she came up to my room after I'd, stomped up the stairs. It was like the most rebellious thing I ever did was like, go into my room, I'm gonna go sit on my bed, It was like the only rebellious thing I ever did was stomp up the stairs. And she came up and was like, I just got off the phone with your dad, and I'm sorry, and you can go. And I was like, I can go? And she's like, yeah, you can go. You were just doing what I told you to do. So I guess in that situation, Jonathan was like, dude, just let her go to the game. Like, it's not that big of a deal. She was literally listening to what you told her to do. And so every once in a while, Jonathan would step in, and most of the time it was straight control for Shannon.
So at 16, your grandfather died. Tell me about that.
My biological grandfather. Oof, that's a rough one. I remember one night after the girls had gone to bed, I'd helped Jonathan put the girls in bed. Shannon was at some event, and apparently my sister, my oldest biological sister, had called Shannon and said my grandfather had passed away, and she wanted to be the one to tell me. And so, Jonathan waited until after we put the girls to bed, and he was in the den. I came downstairs. He goes, hey, Sadie wants to call you. She's going to tell you that your grandfather passed away. I said, okay. At that point, I was like, bitch, you lying. Like, why are you lying? And then, my sister called, and she goes, hey, Sammie, Grandpa passed away. I'm sorry that you didn't, get to say goodbye. She was like, there's going to be a funeral. She's like, I'm not sure Shannon's going to let you go, and so I'm sorry. Oh, God. I told her I loved her and hung up. I went to my room. I cried for a while, and I guess Shannon, she had gotten home from her event. She came upstairs, and she even held me for a while. She gave me a hug, and she was like, I'm so sorry. And then she, went in. She was like, so who was that? And I was like, my grandfather. And honestly, at this point, my family has this thing of, like, mixing up the truth. And so at this point, I thought that my father was adopted. And so at this point, I was really confused on, like, if my grandfather, who actually is my biological grandfather, if he actually was biological, right? And so I was kind of explaining that to Shannon, and she goes, oh, so he wasn't even your real grandfather? That was a real turning point for me, because, Shannon adopted me. And so her saying that he wasn't my real grandfather kind of clicked with me as, oh, so, like, I'm not your real daughter. You're not my real mom because you adopted me. So that was really a pivoting point for me in our relationship in my life at the Stewart's house. It was really me realizing that, and all the tiny little comments that, like, they only got me because they needed a nanny and a cook. Her saying that was just some bullshit, So they didn't let me go to his funeral because they didn't want me around people who could possibly influence me. It was after I moved out, my sister took me to his grave so I could say goodbye.
The comment, and then not even letting you go, that's just uncalled for and so crappy.
I think actually the next day I was obviously still upset, and she told me to get the chip off my shoulder and let it go. So, at that point I was like, well, I need to let it go. That's what I meant. Like, I didn't have time to grieve him. I wasn't allowed to grieve him, really.
I'm so sorry nobody was there to comfort you with that.
I will say my godparents, David and Allie, they've always been very instrumental in, like, my me being able to tell my emotions. My godmother's actually a social worker. She's a licensed clinical social worker. And so she's always been, both of them, they've always been very loving towards me and caring, and have always let me talk about what I need to, and, help me through things. And so they were there when that happened, and they were helpful. I honestly can't remember if I told them that happened. I don't think they knew that happened until after.
Was there ever a point where you confronted Shannon about that comment and asked her about it?
I never talked to her about it because I think at that point I was just ready to move on. I think I was ready to just, I'm going to get through these last couple of years. It'll be fine. I think honestly, I also was like, I've lived through worse than this. So I can make it a couple more years and it'll be fine.
So at 18, you decided you wanted to leave your adoptive parents and move out. Tell me about that process.
Oh gosh, it's like a 4-month process, honestly. When I was 18, my birthday's in July, and so about 2 weeks after my birthday, I sat Jonathan and Shannon down, and I told them, hey, I'm gonna move out. There's so many things happening, and they're just, pushing me, and I'm gonna leave. And basically Shannon was like, that's not how this works. Literally her words, she said, that is not how this works. And I was like, okay, all right. And so, they were like, so what's going on that's making you want to leave? And I remember, Jonathan literally at that point hadn't given me a hug or told me he loved me in like 6 months. And so that was one of the things. And I was like, I literally watch the girls all the time. I have no life. I'm a teenager. You act more like a teenager than I do. And they were like, all right, we'll fix some of that stuff. And I was like, all right, whatever. It's, it got better for like 2 weeks. And then it was right back to the old shit. What I didn't know at that point was that literally the day after we had that conversation, Jonathan went to our bank. I was still a teenager, and we had changed my account over to like an independent account. And so his name was on my account because he was my parent. He went to my account and took most of the money out and put it into an account I couldn't touch. And I didn't know about it. Didn't have my name on it. I didn't know he had taken money. And I didn't find out until October because it was fall break, and I'd gone to Georgia with my best friend at the time, Maddie, and her parents. My phone had broken before we left, and so Jonathan had just upgraded his phone, but his old phone that he'd given me to take with me was like shorting out anyways. And so it broke while we were on vacation as well. And so when I got back, we sat down and I was like, I need a phone. I can't be driving without a phone. What if something happens? I was like, I will go to the bank after school tomorrow, get like $1,000 out. I'll meet you at Verizon after you pick up the girls. I'll pay for my own line, my own phone, everything. Like, I'll pay for everything. Jonathan said, well, you don't have that much money in your account. And I was like, hold up. Like, what are you talking about, dude? That account has all the money I've saved since I moved in with you guys. It has plenty of money in there. And he goes, well, we took most of that money and we put it into an account. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, when you said you were going to move out, we didn't want you to do anything, crazy. And so we took that money. And at this point, I was like, bro, what? Are you joking? Like, that's not a parent thing. That's like, what? What are you talking about? And so, honestly, I left it at that because I was stumped. I just went to bed. I was like, whatever. I went to school the next day, and I used my friend's phone to get on Instagram and find my godmother because I was like, well, I don't know her number, but I know she has Instagram. I'm gonna find her. And so I messaged her, and I was like, hey, this is Sammie. Like, I need to talk to you. Can I call you? Like, it's an emergency. And she was like, okay. So she, sent us her number. I called her during lunch or something. I told her what was going on. And she was like, is there any way you could come to the house after school? Like, I will, we can talk about this after school. And I just happened to have play practice. So I went to my director, and I was like, hey, man, some stuff is going down. Like, I have to skip today, but I'll make sure to come, the other days. And he was like, yeah, it's fine. And, because I kind of explained what was going on. And he was like, okay. And so I went to Allie's house. And I kind of, I was like, man, they took my money. Like, so many lines have been crossed, like, I don't even know what to do. She was like, we've always had this room for you, as soon as we bought this house, we knew that room was going to be yours. She was like, what do you want to do? I was like, Ellie, I gotta get out of there. Like, if I don't leave, they're never going to let me go. Like, I am stuck. She was like, the room is yours when you want it. And so I used her phone, and I called my friend Gabby. She was like, yeah, I'll meet you at your house. And I was like, well, who else is going to help me? Like, I need help moving all this stuff. I called, his name is Jake Stewart. Funny enough, we have the same last name. He was a man that went to church with us, and he kind of took me under his wing. Had always been there and was always super real with me. I called him, I was like, Jake, I need help. He was like, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He came, so I knew they were going to take my car. So I took all of my other keys off of my key ring. I drove into the driveway. I parked my car. I hung up my keys by the door. My sisters were in the chair with Shannon looking at something on the phone, and I walked right past them. I opened the front door and let Gabby and Jake in, and we all went upstairs and started packing my stuff. And Shannon comes up there, and she's, yelling about, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, I'm leaving. And she was like, you can't. And I was like, the hell I can't. Like, I am leaving, Shannon. Like, I'm sorry, but I am going. She was like, well, you can't pack anything we bought you. And I was like, all right. I'll just take stuff that I brought with me, or the stuff that I bought myself, or stuff other people have bought for me. And, she stomps away and runs downstairs or whatever, and we're packing the clothes, and my sisters are, watching. And I know I shouldn't have done it that way, but honestly, I knew they wouldn't let me leave a different way, so I was just getting out while I could. And I know I hurt them, and it was never anything about the girls. But I packed some stuff, and Shannon came back up, and she was like, well, your dad said you can take whatever you want. I was like, all right, man, whatever. And I guess he'd come home, but her car was blocked, so she took the girls in his car. And I don't know where she took them, but they left. Jonathan didn't say a word to me. He sat downstairs while we were bringing boxes in and out. And I finally came downstairs after I'd, gotten everything. And he goes, do you have your social security card and your birth certificate? I was like, yep. And that's all he said to me. I remember leaving, and Jake said, that man looks like he just lost $1 million. But that's how I left, and I moved in with David and Allie, and a lot of things happened after that. It wasn't that I didn't want to be part of their family anymore. It was that I needed space from them. But it was pretty clear after I moved out that they weren't wanting me to move back in. It's pretty clear even to the girls that I wasn't really welcome back. And I tried, I arranged a dinner for us to have at a friend's house, like a family friend. It was just pretty clear after all of that I wasn't really welcome back. So, that's how all that happened. Jonathan eventually did give me the money back, and I definitely didn't do it the way I should have, but it was something that I really didn't know what else to do.
They didn't give you much other choice.
As an 18-year-old, I didn't really see a better way to do it. Honestly, I really didn't think they would let me leave because I'd tried, and she had said, that's not how that works, I really do wish I didn't have to do it that way because I know it hurt my sisters, and that was not my intention at all. I know they're still, mad at me about it, and that's okay. They can be. They have every right to be mad at me about it.
How much money did they move?
It was like $3,000, dude. It was so much money. It was most of it, because I had over $3,000 in there. And I do remember this past summer I was talking to Jonathan about it. We sort of reconnected for a little while, and I even asked him, I was like, do you even know why I moved out? Do you even know? Because no one has ever asked me, why did you move out? What happened? People have, do you still talk to your parents? I'm like, they're not my parents anymore. They've made it very clear that they're not my parents. I've chosen the people I want to be my parents. But I asked him, I was like, do you even know why I left? And he was like, no, I was like, A, that's because you haven't asked. B, it's because you took my money. And he goes, I forgot about that. Honestly, $3,000 it's like pocket change. I was like, what the fuck do you mean pocket change? Excuse my language, but that is crazy. You're a lawyer. You don't make that much money, though. Like, there's no way $3,000 is pocket change. That was a shitty thing to say. Especially if it's the reason that I moved out and you're over here like, oh, pocket change. Right? Yeah. So he didn't even know that until this summer, which honestly amazes me because in October it'll be 4 years.
And even if it was a smaller amount of money, it's your life savings at that point. You gave away like part of these really young formative years to work at a pizza parlor to get that money. So I'm definitely glad you got it back.
Yeah, and it was like me babysitting like other people's kids. They'd given me money and I'd saved most of it because, I mean, it's not like I went out and did things, so most of my money was saved. Every once in a while I'd stop at like Walgreens before school and get candy, but I paid for like my own insurance and like some of my gas for the month. So some of my money also went to that, but most of it went to savings.
Did your experience with your CASA worker change your opinion on CASA?
Definitely not. I think every case is different in its own ways. I feel like mine was definitely very different because a CASA worker adopted me. But no, the way that I was treated by actual, like, the workings of CASA was amazing. I mean, you know, Shannon wasn't the greatest, but we did have somebody there that was trying to see that we were okay. And I love CASA, honestly. It's a very great organization, and I would never speak ill of them.
What was it like moving out at 18?
Definitely scary, for sure. But it was also really freeing because I found myself in a place where I knew I would be safe, and David and Allie, they weren't gonna, tell me to get a chip off my shoulder. They would let me feel the feelings I had. And honestly, it was really lonely, really lonely. I recently actually have gone through documents on my computer, and there is a document in there where I think I was meaning to, it's like sort of like a prayer type thing, me talking to the higher being, God, and asking why so many shitty things have happened, and, just not really giving a shit anymore about what happened to me. And I think the only reason I'm still here today is because of my best friend Cooper. He passed away when we were sophomore. He killed himself. Seeing what that did to his mother and his family is probably the only reason I'm still here. So
yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Yeah, no, it's okay. He's definitely the reason I'm still here. And I think this might be mushy-gushy, but also my boyfriend, because we've known each other since 5th grade. We reconnected in January after I moved out, and that was a really low place. And he brought a lot of purpose back. Damn it. He brought a lot of purpose back into my life, because at that point I was thinking, like, I'm just gonna go to the military and, whatever happens there, like, I'll be a hero. If I die, like, it won't be that big of a deal. At least nobody will think it was their fault. And he talked me into going to community college in Jackson and, getting back into the groove of enjoying life, honestly. Him and my best friend Katie, because I moved in with her family, she was definitely very instrumental in that as well. Just, hanging out with her and going and taking pictures in flower fields. And when COVID happened, we went on a few picnics in, like, the back of her truck because she had a pickup truck. Both of them were definitely very instrumental in helping me start living again. It was really hard moving out. Well, I think what was mostly hard about it was how alone I felt, because I'd been with 3 little girls who were always in my space for, 5, 6 years, and they weren't talking to me anymore. So it just didn't feel like life was that important anymore. But it does now. Gotten better. Moved on a bit. I still miss my sisters, but I'm hoping that when they move out and when they go to college that they'll, realize that maybe I wasn't such a bad guy. Maybe I was just doing what was best for me at the time.
I think they'll know. I think that as they grow up, they'll sort of put things into perspective and maybe even reach out to you.
I hope so. Because I do love them. I watch from afar and talk to them every once in a while, but they're not very open to talking about many things with me right now. And that's okay. I can wait. I will wait. Because I love them.
I'm certainly glad you're still here.
Yeah, me too.
That is so much to go through in high school, early college.
It definitely was, but I do think all the things I've been through have made me the person that I am, and I feel like I'm definitely stronger on this side. And I've met so many people since moving out. Actually, one of my best friends, her name is Chelsea. I nannied her daughter, Evie, who's literally my favorite kid ever. I freaking love that kid. I would totally kidnap her if I could. I freaking love her. But my best friend Cooper that passed away, his brother Nat married Chelsea. And so Evie is his niece. And Chelsea is his sister-in-law. But he never got to meet them, of course. But yeah, she's definitely one of my closest friends, and it's just crazy how much of Cooper I see in her son, and even her daughters, and so I am grateful to still be here. It's very crazy to look back and read things that I wrote back then about how alone I was, when I know now I'm not. I have so many people that I just love and would hate to have missed the opportunities I have right now.
With your experience in mind, what advice would you give to adoptive parents with teenagers?
Make sure that if you're going to adopt a teenager, they know you're adopting them because you love them, not because it's like something you need to do. Make sure they know that they're the reason you're adopting them because you love them. You need to make sure you listen to the kids when they're talking to you, because that will take you so far. Just making sure that they know that it's an open communication, that you will listen to them when they talk and you will hear what they're saying. I think definitely making sure that if there is family, that they're not cut off. I think that was something that was really hard for me, is immediately being cut off from everything I ever knew. So definitely, keep it healthy, of course, whatever's best for the kid, but don't base what is best off of them for what is best for you, because that is different. What you feel is best for you may not be best for the kid, so definitely make sure you're keeping the kid's feelings and, thoughts in your mind,
I think that all of foster care as a system has the issue of saying something is best for the child, but they really haven't considered it, and it's more of a guise of, oh, well, this is what I actually want. This is easier for me. Obviously, you can't say that, so they just say, this is the best for the child. And it's almost like an excuse almost, because you'll be put in this awful situation, and they say, well, there's no other option, so this is what's best.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like a lot of times, there's so many cases out there, so you don't really have a whole lot of time or a whole lot of resources, honestly, to take care for each kid. And so you just kind of, oh, that'll be good enough. Like, time to move on to the next kid. And, And so I feel like that's definitely something that we, as social workers, need to work on in the foster care system for sure. It's something that I'm hoping to fix or help, fix one day.
Yeah, it's not even like individual social workers' fault. It's a huge systematic issue. It's this dance between a lack of funding, a lack of resources, overworked social workers, inappropriate placements. It's very complex.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of policies that have to be, followed, and so that makes it really hard for you to really sit down and care for each kid, because you have to do all the paperwork, you have to go to this amount of kids, you have this many cases, and if you don't do them right, you're going to get in trouble. I'm sure it's really hard for the workers as well.
If you would like to reach out, please send an email to exfostervoice@gmail.com. If you'd like a question to be answered on the show, or just want to voice your opinion, send a short video attached to your email. So now that you're older, how do you feel about adoption? Do you think it's a good system? Do you think we should implement some sort of alternative?
I do think we definitely need to vet people that are wanting to adopt more, but I feel like there are so many parents out there that want to adopt and they're just not able to. Like I've heard a lot about same-sex couples that are wanting to adopt kids, and it's become really hard for them, or it has been really hard for them. I think that's just wild. Just because they're married to the same sex doesn't mean they won't be good parents. Honestly, I think adoption is a great option. I think it is really hard to adopt a kid and do it perfectly, but even when you have a kid and you're a good parent, it's hard to do it perfectly. I just feel like maybe more people need to be exposed to it, and maybe we might have more good people that are willing to adopt.
What advice would you give to teenagers on the adoption list?
Don't lose hope. Gosh, it's so hard as a teenager to be adopted. I think my advice would be, if you feel like something is off, say something about it. You don't have to hide it. If you feel like something in your gut is off with the people you're with, say something. Don't keep quiet. Don't think this is your last chance, because that might not be the case. But it's so hard because I feel like, a lot of teenagers, just like I felt, it's kind of your only choice. But you just gotta keep going. Just keep going. Life will get better. I heard this one thing that, my grandpa used to say it, I think. Sometimes the hardest things are taking you to the right path.
How does being an adoptee affect you now that you're older?
People talk about their parents all the time and, siblings, and that's kind of it's a hard topic for me because I've found the family that is important to me now, at the age of, I was almost 19 when I finally found the final, what I call the final group, And so sometimes it's hard to listen to people talk about how good their families are, but also I'm happy for other people that they have, loving parents that are goofy and protective. So I don't know, sometimes I guess it is hard, but now that I've come to terms with, the state of how things are with my adoptive parents, I think that it doesn't really affect me as much as it used to. But I don't know, I feel like this is a hard question to ask because being adopted is definitely part of who I am. But I guess I try not to think about it that much because of how the situation ended. It's definitely made me, as an adult, want to fix the process and help kids that are going through stuff like this now. For sure, that's definitely how it's affected me, I think, in the biggest way is me just wanting to help other people.
I mean, being adopted is such a big thing, for sure. So how do people react when you tell them that you're adopted?
It's a different reaction depending on the group I'm with. Sometimes Like, for example, the people in the social work building, when I tell them I'm adopted, they want to know, like, oh, like, do you still talk to that family? I get that a lot, which, of course, I don't really talk to my adopted family. So I think it's just more curiosity from everyone. And some people will be like, really? Like, oh, you don't look like somebody that's adopted. What is that even supposed to mean? I don't look like I'm somebody that would be... What are we supposed to look like? I'm a person. I'm just a normal person. I don't understand. Am I supposed to look like a hobo? Like, I don't... What are you expecting? So that is very confusing. That's a reaction I get, I've gotten a few times now. So that is a confusing reaction to me. But most of the time it's just curiosity of, like... So, like, where were you before you were adopted? Like, how old were you when you were adopted? Was it a good environment? What was your environment before? Like, so it's just, I get a lot of weird questions and curiosity for sure when I tell people that.
Wow, I've definitely gotten, like, the implication of, wow, you don't look like an ex-foster, but nobody's ever come out and just been like, said it word for word. Like, people are usually a little more covert than that.
I think a couple times I've had people who don't really know anything about the foster care system and have preconceived ideas that it's just this great thing talk to me about it, and so they kind of want to argue that it's like, this is a great thing. I'm like, but it's not. Like, you obviously don't know. You don't have any research that you have done. I myself, I am the research. I am the statistics. Like, I've been in it. I've witnessed things. I am a foster care kid, so.
Talking about it can allow you to, like, educate people and give your perspective, but you can also have that, like, minute chance that somebody's gonna be like, well, I disagree with you, even though I never went through it and have never met anyone else, and I don't know that much.
I do like the education type of thing, because a lot of people really don't know that much about the foster care system, and I feel like the more we talk about it, the more people will understand how bad it is and try and help, because we need a lot of help to fix it. So, I don't know, I'm okay telling and talking and, letting people be curious about my experiences.
So now you're in college and you're studying social work, and you told me you want to go on to work for DCS.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I think it all goes back to how I was raised. I think just hearing how many kids are in the foster care system and are going through things worse than what I went through is definitely why I want to work for them. Of course, I'm going to start out as a case manager, but I'd like to move up a bit and try and change policies on how kids are treated and how each case is treated and how many cases each caseworker gets, I feel like there shouldn't be any kids out there that are going through the things that I went through or worse. I mean, they're just babies. Somebody needs to advocate for them, and who better than somebody that's been through what they're going through,
For sure. Could you name a couple things that you think need to be changed?
There's so many things, girl. There's so many things. The way kids are treated in foster homes, people who are allowed to be foster parents, how are they slipping through the system? Like, there's so many bad foster homes. How are we not catching it? Like, there are kids being treated so poorly because we allowed somebody who should not be fostering to foster and adopt children. So it's just, there are a lot of things that need to be fixed. I could go on a whole podcast. Like, the whole podcast could just be about things they need to change. There's a couple for you.
You've hit the highlights. You've definitely hit the highlights. I've seen instances where you can have people get rejected for, like, really, like, minor reasons, or you can have people pass who should definitely not be passing, and then you have these awful homes. And I feel like we definitely have an emphasis on quantity over quality.
Just because there's a bed doesn't mean that it's a good place for a kid to be. So
I slept on the couch for like a week because I was like on emergency placement, and that is like not supposed to happen like at all. Like you're not supposed to sleep on a couch, but they literally didn't have another place for me to go. So it's like, it's a balance for sure, because on one hand you're like, okay, you have people sleeping on couches, but on other hands it's like, okay, well, if you give someone a bed and that bed ends up being a hellhole, what have you really done for the child? It's so outrageously complicated.
It really is. But that doesn't mean it's not fixable.
What has your education taught you so far about yourself or your experiences?
I think it's definitely opened my eyes to the other side of foster care for sure. Like talking to like some of the professors that have actually worked on the other side has definitely opened my eyes to that it's also awful for the workers, not just the children. Like a lot of the workers really do want to help, they just don't have the resources. One thing is I'm in a human behavior class, which is really great, and it's from conception to adolescence. That's the first half of the class. The other half I'm taking next semester. So some things we've talked about is like child abuse, like ways to see, like to catch it before it gets too late. And it's very weird because a lot of the things we talked about is like kind of markers. I remember having those markers when I was little, like one of them like bruises that, the kid won't explain that happened, or like I remember when we lived with my birth father, I would go to school with like bruises, like black eyes, because my father would like kick me with his steel-toed boots in the face. So I would have bruises on my face and black eyes, and I was in kindergarten, and my teacher would send me to the nurse, and the nurse would be like, "What happened?" And I knew I would get in trouble if I said anything, so me and my sisters had come up with, we were just playing, and Sadie pushed me on accident, and I just, I landed wrong, and I bruised on my face. I just bruise easily. And, she couldn't really do anything because I wasn't tattling, I guess, So it's very weird being in class and her teaching these other kids, the other students, about what to look for, and me sitting in class thinking I was the kid that she's literally describing me as a 5-year-old. Like, all of the markers she's talking about, I had all of them. It's really weird to sit in class and, she's not talking about me, but she is talking about me. She doesn't know she's talking about me. So I feel very, on the spot sometimes in class when we're talking about things like that. I guess in that way, I've kind of learned about my experiences through the eyes of a social worker. It's really cool, but it also, kind of hits home a little too much sometimes. I'll leave class and I'll be like, I need to go sit by myself for a little while, because that really, that really hit home today. So it's very interesting.
Well, Sammie, thank you for sharing your story and talking to me. It was really good to talk to you, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really nice. A lot of very good questions. Yeah, I'm glad to get information out there and my story, and hopefully it'll give some kids some hope if they hear it. It's not just, you're not just what's happening to you, you're also a whole nother person that's going to live a whole life, and things will get better.